in the chat box that would help us with taking attendance, just so that way we can keep track of all of you that took the time out to join us today. I wanted to share with you a little bit about how this is a three-part series of our Back to School in 2020 webinars. And this was a collaboration with NRCIL, and you've heard from Jen Sibley as you've been signing on this morning. It is also in partnership with Families Together and also Starbridge. And so it is a wonderful collaboration that we've been able to do. And so having us work together to put on the series has really been pretty remarkable. And we just thank all of you who've been joining us during these trainings. We wanted to also let you know that they are being recorded, so that way they can eventually go on the Families Together website, and we will be notifying you once that happens. So a couple housekeeping things, if you wouldn't mind signing into the chat box if you haven't already. Like I said, this webinar is being recorded, and again, that'll be a resource that you'll be able to share with families, other providers that you might be working with. And we do ask that during the training you mute your microphone if you haven't already done so, and feel free to chat questions into the chat box throughout the presentation, because we'll be taking those throughout, and there'll be several periods where you'll be able to do some interactions with us as well. So as we all know, when we think about building bridges, we're like, it's a lot to think about because COVID came. COVID has hit our community in a way that I think is very challenging for a lot of us to think about how do we navigate things. And especially when we think about going back to school. School is going to look very different this year for so many children. Some of them will be doing a hybrid model, meaning they'll have some days in school, they'll have some days out of school where they'll be virtual learning. Some of our students will be doing complete remote learning. All the districts across New York State are working on plans of what that's going to look like. And one thing that we can tell you is it really honestly varies district to district. Also, districts are trying to figure out how will they get resources to families, because as we know, virtual learning, there can be a lot of challenges. Jen and I even were going through that this morning with some weird glitchy things with our computers. How do we help support students and families with that? How do we support working families with that? There's a lot to do, and I'm hoping today during this session about building bridges, I can give you a few takeaway tips to try to help navigate as we go into school year 2020. Because as we all know, it starts with the family. I love this little saying underneath family about how it's a little bit of crazy, it's a little bit of love, or a little bit of loud and a whole lot of love. So think about it. None of us were ready in March for COVID to send our families home and working intimately together, being with each other 24/7. It's a lot for everybody. And so that's why I thought this was funny of a little bit of crazy, because there are some days where it's different, it's hard, it's challenging. Some days the kids are just going to be climbing the walls because they want to do something different. And so how do we help support them? How do we give them things that they can do that will still keep them safe but get some of that energy out? It's a little bit loud. We're stuck in the same space together. But what this school year of 2020 is going to require is us sharing a lot of love with our kids, with our schools, with the staff, and with our communities. And what I mean by that in terms of building bridges is we are really going to have to extend grace and patience. As I said, schools are trying to figure out what this school year is going to look like, and they are extremely challenged by that. We need to understand that things may change. As a mom of two young kids myself, I know what that feels like. It's hectic. It's hard to plan. It's hard to think about, okay, my kids will be here and I'm going to run a training like we are today and try to have two kids on Zoom meetings, one which is in elementary school. It's a lot. And so I encourage you, talk with your district, talk with the staff. And for some families we've been talking to on the phone, they're like, but Kara, they're already busy, they're crazy. How are they going to take time to respond to my call? They will. Districts truly are trying to find space to talk to families, to reach out to them. Some districts have given out Google surveys and things like that to try to know where families are at and what their needs might be. And I encourage you, take time to fill those out, or if you have questions about them, reach in, call the school, ask them what their survey is all about, what is it leading to? Or if you find as the school year kicks off that maybe you're needing resources, maybe the computer isn't working, maybe it's always glitchy, don't be afraid to call the school and ask and say, hey, I need some help, this isn't working out well. Because as we all know, we're under a lot of stress. So today what I'm going to try to help you do is not only kind of focus and get ideas for yourself, but have an opportunity where you can kind of take a step back. And so I like this quote about, remember, perspective can cause two people to look at the exact same thing and see two totally different things. Same is true of COVID. Some of us are like, it's very difficult, it's challenging. Other people look at COVID and say, maybe it's an opportunity for us all to reset, do something different, realize we can think outside the box. Both perspectives can be right because they're coming from the perspective of that person, that individual. Why does the person who sees it as a challenge feel that way? Maybe because every time they turn around, there's something else to do or deal with or fix, or they've lost a loved one. All of those are real pieces of COVID. However, someone else could look at it as that opportunity because maybe now that we're not running around all the time, they're able to do some things with their family they haven't in a long time been able to do or ever do. Maybe they're seeing COVID as an opportunity because we're seeing how flexible and different things can be. Both perspectives can be correct, but you have to create the space to see where are they coming from and why are they coming that way. And with building bridges, I want you to think about how we're going to look at the same thing, which is school year 2020. And we're going to look at it under different conditions, which we're going to hopefully help you look at it new and kind of see this opportunity of what could be in school year 2020. And so the first thing I want you to do is think about how can we do that? When we're already busy, we're already doing a lot. How do families do that when they're stressed about school supplies and other things that they may need? How are we going to help support them? Well, we're going to do that through proactive advocacy, the skill of really looking ahead and preparing for long-term success. We're going to look ahead of what could some of those challenges be that our students and our families could face. And not only that, but taking into account the challenges our staff are going to take, the teachers, the support staff if our children receive services. What is it that we can start doing of looking ahead and planning for things ahead? Because at the end of the day, we want to look back at school year 2020 and say, wow, we did it. We got this. And so to be able to do that, we are going to need to stress communication more than ever before. And so what I wanted to point out to you is there's 4 communication skills that are going to be at play. Part of that is our thinking. Think about how much thinking your brain does in the course of a day. I don't know about you, but for me, I'm constantly thinking. I'm thinking about, okay, what am I going to have to do in terms of any more school materials? What do I need to do to make my home ready for my kids to be able to have a space that can be dedicated for school? What am I going to do to figure out what the school's even doing? Because for some of our schools, it's still kind of evolving and changing a little bit. And they're making tweaks, they're making edits to how they're going to do things. I'm thinking about some of my teacher friends that I know that are really stressed right now because they want to teach, they want to help our students, but they're feeling overwhelmed. So I'm thinking, what can I do to help them too? It's a lot of thinking going on right now, and that may be true for you as well. So I encourage you, give space for that thinking, but also give space for that listening. Hearing from the teachers or the students, or even your own children. How are they feeling about back to school? What are they thinking about? What are they kind of anticipating might be? And with listening too, remember it's looking at the little pieces of how our children are communicating those things to us. And that's that nonverbal piece. Are our children kind of crossing their arms and angry about school? Do they light up when you talk about school? Do they get kind of a puzzled look? Because they're trying to figure it out too. It's important that we read those nonverbal cues. It's also important that we speak. And there's going to be a lot that I'm going to talk about in building bridges about how we speak, because that's really, truly important now more than ever before. Because we have to understand there's emotions and feelings. We have to think about our own feelings and emotions when working with others. If I'm feeling really stressed and anxious, chances are that could play out in how I interact with you. Perfect example this morning, my computer was being really on the fritz. I was feeling stressed, so my interactions with my own family were different, all as a result of the fact that as I was dealing with this computer thing, I was stressed, so my answers were short, they were quick, and it was, yes, here you go, let me move up back to the computer. Think about that. Think about, how are you feeling? Are you nervous about the idea of back to school? Because as we all know, we took a break and we're going back to something different, and different can be hard, different can be scary, different can just be unsettling even. So we have to take into account our feelings. However, it's also important that we can take that step back and look at our other partner's feelings and emotions. We need to think about our students' teachers. How are they feeling about back to school? They're going to need the encouragement just as we would do for our own children. The administration is also going through a flurry of emotions with trying to get these plans together, communicate with families, and think about how hard it is to communicate one way and about one thing, and here's the information, but guess what? I just learned something new from the health department, so now I need to change that. Districts are trying to figure out how to keep us up to date as families on all of that. And now more than ever, we need to be flexible because our emotions affect the way we think and act towards others. Are we going to get frustrated because the same information just got changed again for the 100th time? We might, but then we also need to create the space of, okay, we know right now everything's going to be changing. We need to be there to support each other and think about, how do we act? How do we feel? And our actions can either really build up partnerships with others or create barriers. To build a bridge, we have to have that space where we can take a step back. We can't be so driven and this is what I want and this is how I want it, that we lose sight of the most important thing, which is our kids. How are we going to build partnerships to help our kids grow? For me, myself as a parent, I think constantly of, how do I help lessen this effect of COVID on my kids? How do I kind of shield or buffer them from that, right? I can't buffer them from everything, but I can, in partnership, talk through things like, when we go back to school, is it possible to have a friend that my daughter knows to be in the same class if they're choosing hybrid as well? Or little things like, I'm not sure how my child's going to walk through the door because they were already anxious before COVID, and now they're that much more anxious. I got to take that step back and not be so driven and focused on one thing only that I miss sight of hearing other options, other opportunities, because that's what we all need right now. And in order to do that, we have to understand ourselves to be effective. We have to understand when we're feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, maxed out, but we also have to understand when we're feeling happy and super excited. Jen, when we're doing our partnerships, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got this idea and this idea. And sometimes Jen is like, whoa, that's great. Like, I love working with you, Kara, but let's take a breath first. And I have to understand, while I'm excited and ready and revving, Jen also sometimes needs space. And I have to honor that because that's something that she needs as my partner. But I also have to understand and recognize that in myself, that I was pushing and I was driving a little bit too hard. It's okay to take a step back. And so now I want to talk about the 4 different styles of communication and how you might be. So I have 4 images here. If we were in person, I'd have you up and moving around the room. But for purposes of today, I'm going to use the chat box. So I want you thinking through which one is most capturing how you typically communicate. Are you a hammer? You just want to get things done. Are you a binoculars? You like to kind of step back and see the whole big picture? Are you the magnifying glass and caught up in the details? Are you the teddy bear? You really focus on the emotion side of things. So which one are you? Which one captures you? For me, I would say I'm a blend of that bear and also the details. I love thinking about what could be. So let's see, I'm going to minimize our PowerPoint so I can see what you're putting in the chat. So we have some teddy bears. Oh, I like how another person said you're kind of a mix. Binoculars, so a lot of people like in looking back. Some person said they go from the hammer to the magnifying glass. Exactly. So think of, how do you start out that hammer, binoculars? When I'm in person, some people actually stand in the middle of the room and they're like, I'm a mix. I don't really stand by one of them, or they stand in between, like Yvonne, who's half binoculars and half teddy bear. And it really depends on the situation you're in. Great, Karen. Now I want you to think about, as you've thought about yourself, how is it for you? Like, who's the hardest for you to work with? It's a challenge. You're like, ooh, please, Kara, don't make me have to work with somebody who's just on a mission. Who is it hard for you to communicate with? I see some people saying the hammers that get it done. Yeah, sometimes we're so on a mission, it's hard, right? And we're like, we need to take a step back. We need to pause. We need to see, I see hammer coming in a lot. Holy smoly. And I see someone mention the magnifying glass. The details can get overwhelming, especially right now. Think about all the details going into back to school. There's a lot of details there. That magnifying glass can get frustrating, can get overwhelming. And so I'm going to keep the hammers hard. Some sweat the small stuff. Yes, they do. Absolutely, Yvonne. Some people kind of get lost on little things, but they really kind of need to take a step back and say, it's going to be okay. Like, don't worry about every last detail. And so as you think through that and you think about which one is hard for you, I want you to think back too of how can you take the opportunity to step back in any situation you're in, identify who you are and what you're leading with, and then also how do you take a little extra bit step back to identify what that person across from you or near you is communicating as. You all could very easily identify yourself and those that are hardest for you. What's really hard is taking a step back and seeing, why does that person want to be the hammer and get it done? Do they have a long list of CSE meetings that they're trying to catch up on? Are they so worried about, let's get this concretely done so that way they can go worry about something else or direct their attention elsewhere? Is it a family that's getting lost in the details because they're working and they're like, I have no idea how I'm going to teach my kids and do this hybrid thing and try to figure out working at the same time as a full-time employee? That's hard. Those are all details, but what's important is for someone to be able to step back and recognize that, acknowledge and validate that and say, I bet it's really hard for you right now. As a working parent, you're trying to figure out your own schedule. Let's be flexible. But again, it goes back to the communication. Are you communicating with your team and letting them know, listen, I'm struggling. Can you give me tips? Is there a way that you have a solution of maybe a schedule we could put in place? And remember, a schedule doesn't necessarily have to start at the exact time school does and end at the exact time school does. It can be flexible. Allow yourself that space and that grace, because that's how you're going to build the bridges, not only with the staff, but with your children. Because the reality of today's world is we have to keep a lot of balls in the air. But at the end of the road, if we want to build a strong bridge and a bridge that lasts, we have to have respect and collaboration. We have to respect one another and understand that perspective of where we're coming from. It doesn't mean you always have to agree, because I know, trust me, that's hard. But I do have to respect you and understand where you're coming from, why you're coming from that way. And most importantly, during COVID, we have to collaborate, reaching out to our community, finding different ways to interact. One of the ideas I suggested to our own school superintendent, because we have a large senior citizen population. And so I was like, you know what? I'm like, we always talk about how senior citizens feel isolated. Well, what if we put them on a Zoom meeting with some students and like they could read them stories or tell them stories about long ago? They could maybe teach them something through Zoom. I'm like, let's collaborate. Let's get creative. Let's find ways to help our kids still interact. Think about ways that they can help in their community where they're still building skills. It's just building them in a different way. And most importantly, we always love this, that I'm right. If we are live in person, I would literally be giving all of you a pin to wear that says I'm right. Pretty cool, right? Everybody loves to be able to say that. And think about it. If you bring it back home, you want to go home and be like, yeah, I'm right. You guys just got to listen to me, right? Wrong. If you're right, you have to acknowledge that everyone who's on today is also wearing that same pin of I'm right. We're right because we're coming from our own understanding, our own experiences, and we have to give space for that. And we have to understand that being right and sometimes having to give in a little It doesn't mean that it's taking away from that feeling of you're right. It's simply you're taking into account other information, new things that are being raised or shared with you. Sometimes we think we're right, and then more details get revealed. That magnifying glass comes into play. And then we realize, ooh, maybe what I thought was right isn't right after all, and maybe I need to change. Change is so incredibly hard. But again, sometimes it takes us taking almost that third perspective, stepping back and saying, well, I'm right because I know this, and I know this, and I know that. And then taking a step back and being like, okay, my school principal is right because she's doing it based on this, and this, and this. Where can we find middle? And that's what you have to work towards, but you do it through communication. You do that through collaboration. Again, not giving in. Sometimes people associate that. It's shifting. It's molding the way that you need to go. But you also have to be aware of things that you can control with that. Things like your attitude, your mood, your reaction to the good and bad things that happen, and how you treat other people. It's that self-awareness piece, because we also have to understand what pushes our buttons. Think about it. What pushes your buttons and drives you mad and crazy? For some, when they're in the school meetings, when they hear that's not in the budget, it really makes parents feel angry, frustrated, upset. What do you mean my child's not in the budget? That's a hard thing to hear. The parents are in denial, or mom thinks that Sarah. Think about it. What pushes your buttons when it comes to school? I encourage you, type it into the chat. What are you thinking about? What pushes your buttons? And I'll see if Jen can check out the chat and see if there's anything she wants to share that she's seeing as buttons. See, we're getting a few responses in. What's pushing your buttons? Maybe it's my school's plan is constantly changing, or my school plan is 23 pages long. How do I find time to read it?
So I shared mine in the chat box, which is, we've never done that before, or we can't do that. Yep.
Those ones are great.
We don't do that. Being flexible. We can't do it at all. That pushes my buttons. Stereotyping abilities based on diagnosis. Absolutely.
That's a huge one. And you need to make sure we're flexible. Each child is so different and unique that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And Jen, I really like.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, there's lies, no stability, saying I can't do things without even trying, not having any hope. Never a solid, concrete answer when questions are being asked. Yes, wishy-washy answers are definitely frustrating.
So lots of things, but the reason why it's important to identify those buttons or those triggers is because it ignite an emotional response in you, whether it's sadness, frustration, feeling overwhelmed. Think about the buttons you have right now with COVID. We need flexibility. And that's something that, again, talk with your school. And it's something where it's saying, it's not just you saying, I need you to be flexible, but it's how can we be flexible together to meet my child's unique needs? Maybe your child really regressed and they need some extra attention. How are you going to have the school address that and say they need something flexible, not just let's charge on with a new school year?
We had a couple others that came in. One says, when I work with a child that has behavioral health issues and the school says that the child doesn't have issues, that it's just behavior or a lack of discipline. There's also inflexibility or thinking the kids are less capable than they actually are. Hearing things like, I don't have time for this, or the school being resistant to doing any testing.
So there are tons of things that can push our buttons. And I think what's most important to take away from this is you are your child's best advocate. You know your child through and through. You know for those behaviors that behavior is communication. It's telling the school that there's a need. Thinking through that whole idea of inflexibility or, well, we can't do that, or we've never done that before. Guess what? We've never done COVID-19 learning before either, but we're figuring it out and we're finding different ways to do that. And I think too, for some families, their kids don't do well on Zoom. Like virtual learning is just not a thing for their kids. Talking to the school and saying, listen, we tried virtual learning. Here is what my child would do for virtual learning. And be specific of, they outright refused. They melted down into tears. They were very overwhelmed because it was just too much for them. Share that with the school and say, I know this is what we have to do because of COVID, but how can we help my child get an education in a way that would work for them? What are other tools and resources you have in your toolbox? Whether it is additional materials that they could print for you, whether it's additional resources they could point you to, we gotta figure out a way to meet those children's needs. Because the other piece of this is there's things we can't control or change. And with that, it's the other people. It's people saying or doing the things that you all mentioned for your buttons. We can't control the weather. We can't control things we did in the past or how many people treat or how other people are treating you. But remember, there is a lot you can control. You can control you. And again, it goes back to that self-awareness because that's how we can build bridges. Right now, it's also important to think about where do you fall? Are you really reactive or are you proactive? And with that thinking through, are you reactive? Are you easily influenced by other people? Are you on social media seeing the things like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that? And it's almost like it's too much. I know there's some people who have actually signed away from social media because it is influencing them and stressing them out. Are you being influenced by what is everyone else in the community saying or doing? Think about how reactive are you being versus how proactive are you being? And I love this, what's on the one side of this image of life is what happens to me versus life is what I make happen. When you want to build a bridge, it's about what do you want to make happen. We want to be that connector for our children between them and the school. We don't want to just look at everything that's happened to us and get bogged down with that. 'Cause trust me, that gets heavy. I've been there. We want to think of how do we make it happen? How do we help our kids? How do we be that connector piece? It's about being the initiative. It's about reaching out to the school now saying, virtual learning didn't work. Do you have a strategy that I could use to at least start getting my child exposed to this and ready for this year? It's about taking responsibility, and trust me, I work and I'm overwhelmed with the thought of trying to help my two children learn. But as a parent, it's my responsibility. And when I think about it and I get really overwhelmed, the thing I always go back to is when they were babies and they had their very first milestones that they had to meet. I was there. I was able to do that for them. Sometimes I needed a little advice or tips, but I got through it. Same is true right now. Everyday things that our children are doing or teaching them, whether it's they're helping us cook dinner, they're helping out around the house with chores, maybe they're helping us with going and paying bills so they understand like things don't just magically happen. We can do that by being proactive. And it's remembering our attitude is everything. How we approach this can either build a bridge or it can essentially blow a hole in that bridge. If our attitude is positive, strong, and trust me, I'm not saying the world is sunshine and rainbows, but if we can say, I've got this, we can do this, then you can build that bridge. Attitude is truly everything. And so what I'd like you to think about now is this short video clip. It is from Brene Brown. I absolutely love her. She's one of those people that kind of gets me thinking about resources, thinking about things. And as I was thinking about building a bridge, I was like, can't always do it alone. Sometimes you get to a spot where you need to ask for help. And so I'd like you to listen to this and think about what Brene's saying about asking for help.
How many of you think you want to be more vulnerable and dare greatly? How many of you are comfortable asking for help? Yeah, right. Yeah. That was awesome. Then it sucks. Yeah.
Asking for help from whom?
Right. How many of you had rather give help than ask for help? Okay, so let me just ruin this for you. When you cannot ask for help without self-judgment, you are never really offering help without judgment. So if
Stand up and tell the truth. Okay, let's hear that one again. I gotta write that down.
No,
I hear it better when I write it down.
This one was devastating for me, because where are my social workers? Yes. Hello. Okay, so we're professional help givers. But how many of us are good at asking for it? Here's the bottom line. Ready? When you cannot accept and ask for help without self-judgment, then when you offer other people help, you are always doing so with judgment.
Really?
Always. Because you have attached judgment to asking for help. And so one way I got a lot of my worth for a lot of years was helping other people.
Yeah.
But I would never ask for help, which meant every time I was helping you, I was judging you. And when you extract worthiness for helping people, that's judgment. That's judgment. When you don't extract worthiness and you think, I'm just helping you because one day I'm gonna need help, that's connection. That's vulnerability. Yeah.
Well, you teaching tonight, girl. You teaching.
So with that video, what do you think? What are your thoughts? Because as we all know, asking for help, that's not an easy thing to do, right?
Kara, could you give a quick overview of what the video was? Because we did have a couple people who were having a problem hearing the audio from the video. So if you could just give a brief overview of the video, that would be great.
I'd be happy to. Thanks, Jen, for letting me know. So for that video, what it is about is Brene Brown is talking about asking for help and how we all love helping people, right? It just warms us up. It gives us like that sense of warmth and joy and purpose. And I love how someone typed in, you're stubborn, you'd rather do it yourself than ask for help and have to rely on someone else for help. And Brene really talks to that. And it's kind of like, well, why do we not want to ask for help? What is kind of the self-talk that is happening to us? And again, with building a bridge, we sometimes have to take that step back and really kind of look at, well, why can't I just say, hey, Jen, I need help? Or why, like Jen is a perfect example. Some people couldn't hear really good. And so she's like, Kara, hold up, they need some help. Can you let them know what happened? And so when we ask for help and we do it without judgment or without feeling like there's some thing that's going on with us that's a deficit or a hardship, we can then really truly help others, because we don't want to always think, well, helping someone, it makes you less than. No, helping someone, it creates joy. It creates partnership. It creates collaboration. When we reach out to the school, same is true. When we say, hey, I have no idea how I'm going to teach my third grader this year, because I barely feel like she learned anything at the end of second grade, because it was kind of hit or miss with what she was able to get and what she was able to do. And I'm scared and overwhelmed as a parent of, what's this going to look like long term? And I put on that idea of kind of just stepping back of like, okay, I don't need to look and worry about high school right now. I just need to worry about right now, here in the moment. What do I need as a mom? And sometimes it's concrete. A strategy that I'd suggest for you to think about doing is being able to share what you do in terms of over the school year as a third grade student. So how would you do that as a parent? What would you do? You could go on your district website and look and learn what are the concrete things a student is supposed to learn and the grade level that they're in. Some school districts have that easy to find on websites, but I know for some school district websites, I as a parent will feel very overwhelmed because I really don't know like what bucket should I click on to find that. Send an email to your school principal and say, what should my child be learning this year in third grade? Or what should my child be learning this year in ninth grade? How are the different Regents exams? Learning and finding that information now is going to be something that will hopefully empower you to then be able to help your child, because you're not going to be saying, well, how do I, or what should they be doing? You'll have some concrete bucket areas. Think about it with multiplying and things like that. You can build that into everyday moments with your child. It's something where we could say, I have this many tiles on my ceiling. I take the two numbers and I tell my child, let's multiply and see how we figure that out. So I encourage you, think through how can you take that information that you could get from your schools and then use that to help you. And again, not worrying about judgment of they're going to think I'm crazy because I'm asking this, or they're going to be like, why is this happening? Or, oh, it's that parent again who's asking some more questions. No, right now as people, we all have questions we need to ask so we can get answers to start moving forward with building the bridge. And remember, it's building a bridge piece by piece. Because as we build that bridge and we try to get our message across, it's about only 7% of the words we actually use. However, as you heard in my tone of voice, 38% of that is going to help my message get there. If I'm, hey, I need to know, what's my kid going to learn this year? Probably not going to get the same responses. I'd love to, if you could help me find or locate on the website a list of what my child should be learning this year. Or I'm really overwhelmed with the thought of Google Classroom. Is there some resource you could help me find to understand it? It's your tone. Tone as you speak, but also tone as you text, type, email, post on social media. I have to share that because school staff are connected even if they're not our friends on social media. They're hearing from others about what's being posted there. They're hearing and things of what messages are being put out into our community. And those messages now more than ever need to be, how do we find this missing piece for this bridge? How do we work together to do this? And it's also about our nonverbal. It's how our body is as we're talking. One funny thing that I'd love to have you think about too with that is, now that we're wearing masks, like we're missing this kind of chunk of our face, right? And I know they're starting to create some masks with that empty space so you can actually see people's mouths. But if you really start to watch people's eyes and how their eyes and their brows and they kind of close their eyes or different things like that, that's nonverbal communication. Our eyes can communicate a ton. And now more than ever, that visual contact is going to be teaching a lot about getting our message across. We have to also be careful of our assumptions. Again, am I assuming the school's too busy? Am I assuming they're automatically going to judge me because I say as a mom I need help? I'm an advocate. I help families for a living for my job, but I'll be honest, I don't have all the answers. And there's days as a mom that I'm rubbing my head and saying, I don't know what to do either. How are we going to figure out this school year? I can't make assumptions that people are too busy. I can't make assumptions that I'm just going to figure it out. I need some concrete stuff, and all of us do. So think through, what is that concrete thing that you need to help you start kind of being able to take those initial steps to building the bridge or doing your piece. Think about the tone and how it's not what you said, it's how you said it. Really think about that. Think about outside of COVID, before COVID, when you'd have disagreements or misunderstandings, it wasn't always the words, it was the tone, how we say things, how we communicate. Right now, for me, I kind of look at the community as, I almost feel like we're very reactive. It's almost like we're all like just on the verge of like going, yeah, and yelling at each other. The tone can affect that. Tone can change that. Help bring someone back down. For our kids, sometimes I think when they're really hyped up or anxious, sometimes actually lowering your voice can help you with kind of drawing them back down. So when they're really amped up over Zoom, quietly say, wow, I get it. Zoom must be really hard. What could we do to try to get you more comfortable? Should we do a Zoom with our family? Should we try to do a Zoom thing with a friend? There's different ways that we can figure out what the problem with Zoom is. I know for us, we learned that one of the issues with Zoom was the whole camera piece of being able to see yourself. It's a lot, like it's almost exhausting. I know for professionals, when we go from one Zoom meeting to the next, it's a lot to be on, right? Our kids feel that too. So helping them figure out how they can turn off their camera or hide their camera so that way they don't see themselves, but their teacher can still see them. It's important. We also now more than ever need to kind of give everybody opportunity to save face. And I say that because nobody wants to be like, I screwed up, I did that wrong, I'm sorry about. Give people space to make mistakes. I tell people a lot right now, people need space and grace. They need space to make mistakes and do the best they can. They also need grace when those mistakes or those hardships hit. So that way they understand you're not angry, you're not mad. We understand we're all figuring it out together. But it's also important that you have boundaries. Think about how often we communicate virtually right now. Everyone, I feel like is like a text and email away. We're almost more connected even though we're socially distanced, right? So what are your boundaries? Do you put a do not disturb on your phone at night so you're not worrying about what that text message is you just received or that notification that an email just came in? Do you have certain times that you work and then have that time for you dedicated, a space away? In order to build a bridge, you need boundaries. You need to know what you can do and what you can't. Are you the heavy lifter moving the beams and things to build the bridge? Or are you the person who's the architect that's standing back and watching as it's being built? Really think through that, because the boundaries of knowing what you can and can't do, it's not okay to just constantly push yourself over that line and break that line. You need that space for healing, for health, for well-being. We also need that opportunity for real listening, because here's the deal. We can speak 125 words per minute. We can listen, though, to 400 words per minute so that we're able to understand the information and understand the real intent. We have to listen. Think about that. 125 words can be spoken, but we can hear 400 per minute. That's a lot of information coming in. But here's what's happening. Most people aren't really listening with the intent to understand. We're listening with the intent to reply. Again, think of how I said, I feel like we're in that reactive space. So we have to always have an answer. We have to know what we're doing. We have to know what school year 2020 is going to look like because school starts in just a few short weeks. But are we really taking the space to step back, hear what the school districts are saying it's going to look like in each of our communities, taking a step back, hearing what the families are saying, taking a step back and hearing how can our communities come and help surround us and support us? I know some families too are creating like little pods to kind of help each other with childcare and with schooling. We need to really listen in order to understand what it is our families need. Is it childcare? Is it they need help with the learning? Is it they need help with the technology? Do they need help with just figuring out Zoom? A lot of those things can happen if we listen to understand our families. To do that, we need to ask clarifying questions. What's the desired outcome? It's really kind of replaying back what you heard. Let me see if I understand. Is that correct? Help me understand. Helping you to understand means you are taking space back, setting your assumptions, your knowledge, all of that to the side, and creating a space for someone to come in and tell you what it is that they are saying is a need for them. It's creating the space for you to come together. Think back to the old days when we did connecting cans with a string and talk back and forth. It'd be muffled and hard to hear sometimes, right? The same is true now. We're socially distanced. All we have is text messages, phone calls, emails, or Zoom meetings to communicate. It can be hard to understand what is the desired outcome, and sometimes that's what we need to find. What is it you hope we can do for you? What is it that you're struggling with? Let's make sure we understand fully and completely. Because we also have to acknowledge that they have feelings and maybe they're really frustrated. We have to acknowledge that, validate that, and give space for it and say, I hear you. You work full-time. You are stressed beyond belief with your own job and figuring out how to do that in COVID. And I understand you're scared and worried for your children. It is a tough time for us all right now. What is it that I could do for you today to try to take some of that stress away? Because we all know no one has a magic wand to make this all better, make it all easier. It's also important now more than ever in COVID times to not know all the answers. It's okay to say, I don't know how to do this. As a parent, I don't know how to parent during COVID. I don't know whether I should let my kids play with friends or if they should stay away from them. I don't know if I should be teaching my kids this or if I should be teaching my kids that. It's okay to not know all of that. You need to look into the information and say, let me get back to you, and really get back to them. Or the other piece is help find that information together and say, I'm not aware of anything, but if you happen upon something, I would love it if you'd be able to share that with me. That creates collaboration and partnership. You may not have the answer they want to hear though, but it will be the correct information. That's what families need. That's what providers need. That's what our communities need. They don't really want to have to worry about misinformation getting out there. And remember, there's a difference between misinformation and the schools giving us more updated information, because not only are the schools doing that, State Ed is doing that, and the U.S. Department of Education is updating things to kind of be ready in response to COVID. They're giving us the correct information for the time, but again, we have to be flexible and give space and grace. And also thinking through, we can't solve problems using the same kind of thinking we used when we originally created them. So think of what would happen if you don't agree right now. What could you do? What actions do you take? What's another alternative? What's the bottom line? And what I say when I mean what's another alternative, if Zoom didn't work for your child, what else could the school offer? Are there any additional resources that they have? Poking into it, finding out why Zoom didn't work. Thinking through for our children who receive special ed services, what are the ways that we can meet those needs? Because that's what it always should point back to, is what is the need? Not always just saying, well, this is all we got, this is all we know. No, let's get creative, let's get flexible. But part of that sometimes happens together in partnership, because we keep the focus on the child. We don't worry about who said it or why they said it. It's what does that child need? How do we help meet them where they're at? So how is this all done? How are all these skills used together to build those bridges? It's identifying what the current problem is. The problems, I know, can be numerous. I've been there, I have felt it. I've been like, I don't even know which one to put at the top because my stack looks like this one on the side. But I had to pick one and obtain complete information about it. I also needed to step back and look at it from another person's point of view. Is this really as hard and as bad as I think it is? When you think about teaching your children, if you have any others living in the home, taking the step back and looking at it from another one of your family members' perspectives. Did they see it as hard and challenging? Or did they think you did a good job? Sometimes we set really high standards for ourselves. So by stepping back, that third perspective of looking and saying, oh, that wasn't so bad after all. They eventually got on. They actually answered a question for the teacher. That's a success. But also, what were the barriers to get there? Was I feeling stressed? Was I feeling overwhelmed? I can tell you as a mom, my children pick up when I'm stressed, when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm happy, when the things are great. And they respond to that. Their behavior shifts and changes a little bit. Again, it goes back to that self-awareness piece. I have to be aware of what I'm bringing when I'm understanding what the problems are and how I'm going to address them. I have to make context in order to do that sometimes. I need to talk to other parents. I'll be honest, not only is it other parents, but I have a friend that I call my reality check friend. I can call her at any point, tell her what's going on, and say, what do you think? Is this crazy? Is this normal? Am I overreacting? Am I underreacting? Going back to all those things that we talked about at the beginning of today's presentation. We need that with other people right now. We need to think of who can that buddy be. For some, it's talking to parents or friends. You might want to call up Jen or I, or talk to an advocate or an attorney somewhere else, or even talk to the New York State Education Department of Quality Assurance representatives. You have lots of opportunities to make contact, to ask questions. What should also be on this list right now, too, is your school. Calling one of the trusted adults at your school, whether it be the school social worker, psychologist, principal. Really think through who you can talk to. And I share the building level people as opposed to your superintendent level, because when all of this was happening over the summer and it was like school never really stopped, I was like, I have all these questions. And I'm like, I just don't know. I'm like, it's all about the plan. So like, it doesn't make sense to talk to the principal about that because they just get it passed down. I should go to my school superintendent. And I did, and he was wonderful. He took time to talk with me, but then some new information came out and I had 100 more questions. And when I really looked at the questions and saw that he couldn't respond right away, I was like, you know what? Well, let's give it a try. Let's call our building principal and say, hey, do you happen to know the answer to any of these things? So that way I could get help and get support. It's finding a person that you could say, maybe it may not be my first person in my brain, but maybe another person on the list. It's okay to ask someone different, because remember, it's okay to not have all the answers. And guess what? For those that were kind of more like school district questions, guess who she referred me to? The school superintendent. So rather than giving a long list to him, I was able to give pointed, directly identified things that I needed answers for to my school superintendent. You can do that too. You can help families with doing that. You can help them also locate the information, because sometimes that can be hard if you're a provider. And if you're a parent, again, if you're really overwhelmed, reach out to one of your trusted people at the school, or feel free to call us. I've had several calls with parents where it was just a matter of helping connect them and finding the information that they needed. Because the other important thing with making contacts is looking at your district page at the updates that they have about your school reopening plans, so you can stay informed about what is happening. Because there are options upon options. Right now, the schools have dedicated all this time, as Governor Cuomo has asked them to make these plans. In addition, the governor has asked school districts to hold meetings with families to help them understand what the options are and what's going on. I'm going to share with you, sometimes it can be overwhelming. Sometimes it can be really stressful. If you're in one of those spaces as a parent where you're like, I don't even know what to choose because I don't feel like either one is a perfect fit, that's okay. Because what you can do is you can write down the two options and you can kind of create a T-chart and say, what are the gains for my child under virtual learning? What are the benefits to my child doing a hybrid learning where they go to school some days? Then make another chart. What are the deficits? What are the challenges your child's going to face? Make them concrete, because when they're all up here in your brain, it's going to feel like this side. I don't know, like, which way should I be going? Writing it down gives you that space to really kind of look at it, understand it, work with it a little bit. And then it also gives you a tool and a resource for when you're making those contacts and talking with others. And then you want to make that action plan. Write an outline. What do you want to cover? What do you want to do? So thinking through this school year for 2020, what is it you hope for your child? Go beyond just, I want them to get an education. What do you hope they learn this year? What are you looking forward to seeing them blossom with? Clearly identifying what you want and why. We all know you want your child to have an education. That's very normal. That's very doable. But think about the why behind, why are you going to find a creative way to do it? Because we all know none of us planned to do it in March. None of us planned on doing it as long as we did, but we figured it out. We found a way. It may not have been pretty. It may not have been perfect, but we did it. We're here today, and we're starting to talk about what's to come. List your priorities in order of what you're willing to negotiate on and what you can't. What's your bottom line? What do you need most for your child right now to get an education? Is it support services? And if so, which ones? Why? What is it that that child needs? Again, going back to every single time, what does the child need? What does the child need? What do they need to have success? What do they need so they can grow as people? And sometimes you need to take that step back too, because as our children grow and mature, I have an older child as well. And as I think through his perfect plan, I need to ask him. I need to say to him and ask him, what do you think about this? What do you think would help you to have a successful school year? What resources do you need? How do I create that space for you so you can have success when you're home? And don't get sidetracked. Don't get lost in the details of things that have happened before. Write yourself a note to look at. Put it on a Post-it note. Does this topic lead towards my child's success? So every single time as you're talking about your child, have that Post-it note handy. Does this help towards the success? Then charge on and keep going. If not, then find where those rails reconnect at the bridge so you can have that collaboration happen and get back towards working towards your child's success. I encourage you to, one thing I've been talking to families about, finding ways to write yourself notes throughout. So you have that opportunity in that space to kind of take a breath and step back, meaning, what was I able to accomplish today for working towards my child's success in school? You're not going to normally just ask yourself that, but if you start coming up with little questions that you could post around your house, then maybe when you go to the fridge to get a drink or something to eat, you'll see a note there that reminds you, oh, wow, I was able to do that, or, oh, this is great, we got that done. And you can toss that Post-it note and think of a new one that you could put. Taking things in small steps, taking things day by day. Trust me, I used to be a solid planner. If I could plan out my entire calendar way out in advance, I would. But I've learned I can do that, but I need to be flexible and understand things might change or flex, and that is okay. Sometimes agreements can't be reached though. So if it can't and you're in a CSE meeting, make sure to have it noted that in the meeting that an agreement was not able to be reached. Really take some time to process what is your next step going to be, because obviously there was some big hurdle that got in the way. Know your due process rights, and most importantly, control your emotions. That is easier said than done, but you got to do your best to stay calm right now. Make sure you're staying polite, being assertive but not aggressive, and thanking people for their time. Being collaborative, optimistic, working together to build that bridge and celebrate all the victories. Because the reality is we can't change the past, they can't either. So instead of spending a large amount of time talking about all that's happened before, we need to spend 10% of our time talking about that and 90% talking about how do we make things better. Again, taking that step back, okay, the past has happened, acknowledge it, give it space, and then move on. How do we look up at what this year is going to be? And when we send emails, post on social media, pause. Before you send that text message, pause. It is very easy for tone to be read into something where tone does not exist. Jen might send me a text message later today, and if I'm feeling anxious or I'm stressed about something or I'm helping another parent, and I look at it and I quick read it, I could potentially read tone in it because of where I am, the space I'm in. Take the time to pause. It's okay if you want to save it in your drafts folder or type it out and then go back later and see if you really want to send it. That can help. It can help build bridges. Again, it's about taking a step back, giving it its space, deciding later, yeah, I still feel that way, or no, I think I need to tweak the words because that sounds a little assertive or overly assertive or possibly angry. And as Henry Ford says, coming together is the beginning and keeping together is progress. Working together is success. It's hard. Coming together right now is what we need to do as communities. That's where this school year is going to start, by us coming together. It's all the work we do of stepping back, creating space for people to have changes or make mistakes or learn as we go. That's going to be the keeping together part this school year. But when we actually put in the work, and it won't be easy, I can't even say for sure it'll be hard, but I know it's going to take work and I know it's going to take dedication. And when we do that, we're going to have success for our kids. So as you approach your meetings, and as you go out in the community and you're sharing this information, I want you to think and use this acronym to kind of think about T. Is what you're sharing true? When you're talking about your school district with other families, when you're talking about information that is being shared, whether it's at the school level, community level, state level, is it true? H, is it helpful? I, is it inspiring to some action? N, is it really necessary? And K, is it kind? We really need to start kind of creating that space for us to pause and really think through things. And I want you to be a connector as you go out to the community. I want you to find ways that we can figure out which pieces go together. I shared one of those, so thinking through how can we leverage our senior citizen population to help. It could just be that they're talking to some of our kids or doing fun things with our kids through Zoom to give us as parents a little bit of a break. Thinking through how do we really listen this year? How do we listen with the intent to understand? And one strategy that I share that helps you find those hidden gems or those opportunities to really listen and think outside the box is something called believing in the abilities. And that comes through the protective factors framework. The protective factors are 5 things that across cultures and communities they have found that families need in order to be strong. And this is a beautiful image that was created from a group of families in Michigan to help families with remembering these 5 things to be strong. It's something I have learned about. This is my lifeline when I'm struggling the most. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is hold up your thumb. Give yourself that thumbs up. That need is social emotional competence of children. That is our children understanding how they're feeling, how they're interacting, and their competence and ability to work with one another and work with us. So that's just core. Kids need that, right? Hold up your pointer finger. That's knowledge of parenting and child development. We as parents are our children's first teacher. Parents need to hear that right now. You were your kid's first teacher. Yes, you have all these amazing, talented, dedicated staff here to help teach your child, but you were the first. And because of that, you're going to be able to help this year too. Count on that. Next one, don't hold them up alone. Middle finger, but with 2 fingers side by side. That's your social connections. Right now, we're distant. Our fingers are apart. How do we help each other feel connected? How are we taking time to call each other and just check in? Not for work, but just to check in as people. Then your ring finger. Think of that ring. It's a dedication to yourself. More now than ever, we need to build resilience. Resilience is about going through this really hard, achy, challenging, unbelievable time in our lives, coming out strengthened and transformed on the other side because we did it. And we all will, and we will figure it out because of our pinky. The concrete support in times of need. And that goes back to the Brene Brown video. You need to be able to ask for help if you need it. Even if it's, I really need help because I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. And to be honest, I don't even know how I'm going to do this next thing. It's okay to ask for help. Do it free of judgment. And what I do to help bring us and tie it to the children is ask these questions. And because I've done this several times, I'd actually have you do a beading activity if we were in person. But because we're not and we're virtual, I've had people ask me for what the things are that I say. So I posted it on the middle of these beads. And so what I'd have you do is tie a bead that stands for the child at one end of the string, and you tie it super tight to the end. Then I would have you tell me, what does that child need to be socially and emotionally ready to learn? Think about it. What does that child need for this year? 3, what knowledge does that child need to have so they can participate? And these beads would be loose that just slide on. 4, who can that child learn and grow with? 5, what tools does that child have to help them if they encounter a problem? That resilience building. And 6, what supports does that child need so they can be an active participant in their learning? And last but not least, tie off the string with another bead for their hopes and dreams for that child. This is a strategy you can use, or when you get these slides, Jen will be mailing them out to you. Questions you can ask to help kind of center in a place where things are really overwhelmed. Some concrete questions that you can share and use in your community or with your families if you're a provider. If you're a parent, it's a concrete thing you could use if you want to sit down and kind of put to paper some of the things that you're thinking about for this school year. Because we all need to pause and take a break sometimes. Because at the end of the day, we need to find ways to be helpful, hopeful. And I shared this on our second training, but I want to bring it back again for those of you who may have missed our second training of some daily quarantine questions you can ask yourself to find that positivity, to create that space. You can ask them all at one time. You can space them out over the week. You can even use them with your family when you're having dinner. Really thinking through, how do we stay positive and connected in this really challenging time? How do we build our bridges? It's by creating space for us to be grateful, creating space for us to kind of keep on learning. And I wanted to let you know that Jen and I would like to do a family empowerment series and kind of continue this building that we've been doing with you these last 3 sessions. We'll be sending out some more information about that with a survey later so we can see what your interest is. What other topics do you want to hear from? How do we help you keep building that bridge, repairing it, keeping it strong, making it grow so our families and communities can stay strong? And last but not least, we're going to end with a few resources about updates on COVID from the U.S. Department of Education. And then we also have the New York State Education Department link for you because, as I said, information is constantly being updated. It's important that you stay connected with all of that. And with that, I just want to say thank you and see if there are any questions. We so appreciate all of you joining us.
So we didn't have any questions, Kara, that were chatted in, but I did want to say that we did have a comment that was posted earlier, and I'm going to try to scroll back up to it because it was really awesome. And it said, we created a pod because we saw depressed behavior with some of our kids, and when we talked to them, they just miss their friends. So the ones who were able to stay set apart from most people agreed to tell the others if they had been out, and if not, then we set up play dates for the kids at least one day a week. And I thought that was a phenomenal way to help the kids stay connected and help them just find a way to be able to express how they were feeling with each other. So that was a great point to make. So I wanted to share that with everyone.
That is a huge point. And like I said, a lot of families are starting to do that, strategically looking through in terms of grade levels too. And again, it's something where I'm working with my local district to talk about, like, we would typically have room parents if kids were in school. How could we do room parents differently? How can we leverage the groups that typically would participate in our school, like PTAs and PTOs? They're a wealth of information. How do we leverage them to help? Because as we all know, school resources are maxed. How do we make sure that we can help get that information?
Right.
And absolutely, Beverly, I'll pull that slide back up. I love those questions too, and feel free, anybody else, if there's something specific. And like I said, Jen will be sharing out these slides. I know for us at Starbridge too, if you'll be watching our website and social media, if you're connected to us there, we are going to be posting out some social media tips for families. So be watching for that to come. We're really trying to get creative of how do we give tangible, quick, doable things to our communities to help them be strong.
So I just posted the Starbridge website in the chat box. So if anybody wants to go to Starbridge and check out that for more resources, you're more than welcome to do so. Any other questions? I know that there's some great comments. We want to take this opportunity, Kara and I, to say thank you to everyone who's been attending our series so far. It's been wonderful to have everybody attend, and some great feedback and some great participation so far. You guys have been very good with participating and chatting in your questions and just following along with everything. Yep, we're going to be sending out the slides. We did want to let you know that I know that there has been some questions about the recordings. We're in the process of trying to get those recordings together and out to you. So stay tuned to your email. We will have those up as soon as possible. So we definitely will have that to you as soon as we can. So I am going to post the link to the follow-up survey here in just a minute. So that anybody who would like to take our survey, that would be wonderful. We'll be posting that in just a moment.
And by completing that survey, it helps keep us going because we are grant funded to be able to do trainings like this. And please, as you need anything else, let us know. I love, Beverly, how you shared a phrase in education that you use is building the plane as we fly. Yeah, I have heard that, and that is so true now more than ever. And Julie, I'm glad it was helpful and relatable information for you. We were hoping that we could give everyone some tangible things that they could do as they prepare for school 2020. We know it's going to be very different. We want you to encourage you to reach out, ask for help, and do so without putting any judgment on yourself, so that way we can make help and asking for help be seen in our communities as something strong and important for us all to do.
So the link to the follow-up survey is in the chat box for anyone who would be so kind as to click on that and take the follow-up survey for us. I will be sending out a link to the follow-up survey with the slides and some other handouts that Kara has provided for this particular workshop. And just as a reminder for anyone who has not already signed in, please make sure that you do so with your name and where you're from in the chat box.
And then Jen and I will be staying on to answer any other questions that come up in chat. But if you are set and don't have any questions, feel free, click on that link, complete the survey, and then you get a bonus little bit of time, maybe taking that step back and thinking about what can you do different today? Or what space do you need so you can do what you need to do?
And if you do